everybody, it's Brent. Welcome again to my backyard. Today, I'm going to walk you through the starting process of dry aging a rib roast. So my good buddy Vikings fan Tim Erickson came over, brought a roast. We're going to add it to the dry aging refrigerator, and I'll show you a little bit about that too. So what you're going to need to do this is the best cut of rib roast you can get. Choice is good. What you want to look for in the rib roast, if you can see it here, Tim, you want to look for a lot of marbling in the ends. This one has some, but the higher dollar ones, well, you'll see it'll just be peppered with fat within the meat. That's the marbling, where the fat goes in where the muscle tissue is. And that, while you're cooking, the fat will break down, melt some of it away, and that's what makes steaks tender and juicy. So, if you look at the book, The Food Lab, which is a great reference for all kinds of food chemistry, it'll talk to you about dry aging. A lot of people are afraid to dry age because they think that there's a humidity requirement that they got to stay with, and as they've kind of come to find out, and it's kind of a secret within the industry, because the outside of the meat desiccates during the drying process, dry aging process rather, the desiccation is a dry coating around the meat, and what that does, and it occurs within the first week or so, is it locks the moisture in the meat. So if you read the Food Lab, he says, I varied the humidity in a controlled environment between like 30 and 80%, and there was no perceptible difference. So he's done a lot of tests on that. Also, if you see on the Food Lab book here, Tim, you got this here? Geddy Lee's Big Beautiful Book of Bass. I picked that up on Friday night. That was November 1st of 2019. My hero, the lead singer and bass player of Rush, I got to actually bump fists with him. I got some pictures coming for the wall. I'm pretty excited about that. Had a great weekend. And we're going to finish it up by watching some football and working on this rib roast. So the things you're going to need. You're going to need a rib roast. Spend the money, get the highest quality one you can. Tim, what'd you pay for this?
$115.
$115, and it's a 19.36 pound rib roast. So what, $6 a pound roughly?
Roughly.
Okay, so I like to lay out, for a big cut of meat like this, I like to lay out a garbage bag, as just helps with the cleanup. I like to truss mine. If you don't, gravity over time will tend to sag this straight down and you'll get a flat cut of meat. So I like to truss it up, and we'll walk through that. And you'll need some scissors for the string. I also bought some food tags so we can write down the date it goes in and how much weight it was. So we'll weigh them after they dry out, and we'll do a little research on our own, whose cut of meat it is, because I share the dry aging fridge with my buddies. Need a pan to fill this out. So let's get started. I'm gonna lay out a bunch of string first. Then we'll cut this thing open and we'll dry it off and we'll truss it up. So we'll set that up here. Okay, so I've laid out some string. I have a couple of them a little longer than the rest. I'm going to use those to tie the tag to. So the next thing you do is we're going to take it out of the packaging, but we're not going to rinse it. All we're going to do is pat it dry. So scissors into the sink. Tim, you getting all this? It is NFL Sunday. It's week, I believe, 9. And what the Vikings are in a playoff run, right, Tim?
Yes, they are.
Or in the playoff hunt, I should say. They're a wild card right now behind the Packers. But you're a game and a half behind them.
2 division losses.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep the packaging that the meat came in on it so that I'm not contaminating the meat in the sink. So I've got her cut open here. Got some paper towels. Don't be afraid. Now, These are those $150 steaks you're gonna get in those high-end restaurants in Vegas and Seattle and stuff like that. They're dry aged, generally ribeyes. And we're gonna cut a bunch of ribeyes out of this roast when we take it out. Okay, so got the top. This is also a bone out. You can do them bone in or bone out, and just remember that the bone will be a great seal. So that'll be an area where you'll have no meat loss whatsoever because the bone will be the outer edge. So you can do them either way. Now, because they trim the bones out of this, you'll see it has ridges, and I'll show you more when we get it back on the counter. But what that means is it's going to add a layer of difficulty when we trim the desiccated meat off the outside of it. So I've got one side fairly well dry here. Now we got the fat cap. And again, a good fat cap is great because that is also a moisture barrier. Doesn't have to be perfect. The dry ager has a good air circulation system. So now we're going to take this baby and set it on our strings. I'm going to rinse my hands off real quick. Throw the garbage away. Rinse out the sink. And this is me drying my hands. Just because I don't like them wet. Do you, Tim?
Nope.
No? Okay. Alright, should have some friends over later, watch some football, talk about our dry ager. Pro tip here, instead of doing the standard granny knot, add one more loop to it, and then when you pull it tight to truss it up, it'll kind of help hold the knot in place, so you can see it's not letting go at all right now, so that makes it easy to tighten it up.
So did you learn that knot tying in the Navy, or?
No, I learned how to drink in the Navy.
Oh.
Yes, I've been to several advanced classes. One last night. I'll be paying for it later, I'm sure. So again, we're trussing, and what we're doing here is we're trying to keep this meat as round as possible, so at the end of the process, we cut the steaks out, and they're the thicker, wider, fuller cuts. When I first did this, I didn't truss the meat. I set it in there, and it kind of squashed over time, and so my steaks ended up being about that tall. You can kind of visualize it. So one more loop. And what did we say this was? 19.36 pounds.
I think
right?
19.81.
I'll double check because we want to write that down on our tag. I'll be cutting the extra string off of this. So did you get your deer yet this year, Tim?
No. I only had a week early season. My late season starts at the end of the month, and that goes for 3 weeks.
Okay. And we're doing the last piece here. And I'm going to go ahead and add the tag to this one. And I like to have a nice long tattletale piece of string for the tag because you don't want the tag resting on the meat. You want it laying in the, you want it laying on the rack in the dry ager. So let me look at this tag real quick. 19.36 pounds.
And you win the bet. I was off.
Yep. Well, I normally am right,
That's it.
unless I'm betting on the Redskins. So scissors,
Hey, they have one win yet this year.
cut our tag, and you know, if somebody knows where I can get like reusable plastic tags that you could use a marker with, that you know, dry erase or whatever, post a link. I've been looking, I can't find them.
How about
So,
just laminating them?
Tim's. This is a 19.36 pound. We don't need to say ribeye, we know that. We what's the date today? The 3rd? Yeah, the 3rd of November. So that means we're going to shoot for 45 days. I should have said that. You can do this for any length of time you want. 7 days, I think, up through 60. The meat won't spoil as long as you keep it around 38 degrees. You don't want it to freeze, and you'll see in the dry ager that I actually have a heater in there also with the temperature controller. So I've found, and we have found, because this isn't our first time, that 45 days seems to be a pretty good time. The first time I did this, we dry aged a thinner roast. I believe it was 30 days, right, Tim?
Yep.
So we did 30 days, and I bought a fresh one ribeye, and to have as a comparison, we pulled the one out after 30 days, trimmed the outside of it, and started staking it. And I could tell just in the cutting of the meat that there was gonna be no comparison with the fresh ribeye. The fresh ribeye was relatively tough compared to the dry aged. So the dry aging is gonna give you a tenderness that's gonna blow your mind, and it will give you a little bit of flavor because of the way the meat kind of breaks down over time without being frozen, and the bacteria that is on it, you know, right now and stuff, even though it'll be refrigerated, will still be somewhat active. It's not going to hurt it, but it's going to alter the flavor a little bit, but it's going to be positive. So read the food lab. So we have Tim's, we have the date, and we have how much it weighed. Do we need anything else?
No,
I'll write a rib roast in there just to be sure. Okay, so now we're going to tie this on the long string here.
What kind of string is that you're using?
Oh, that's a good point, Tim. This is butcher's twine. We use, and I'm not sponsored by anybody ever. Well, not yet anyway. We go to what was formerly known as Cash and Carry and is now called Smart Foods. And it's a restaurant supply chain on the West Coast. I'm not sure how far they extend throughout the country, but butcher's twine, you can cook with this. I don't know how hot before it starts to burn. It's pretty cheap for a big roll of it, basically thick kite string. And like I said, we're going to trim all these off because you don't want it sitting on the meat. We want this to be as clean as possible. I actually got up early because I knew Tim wanted to do this, and I cleaned out the dry ager because last time we put some meat in there, we got a little blood dripping. It looked kind of nasty, but I got her fixed now. So now I'm going to walk around, and then we'll go outside, and I'll show you I'm going to give a little bit more drying on this first. I'm seeing some shiny moisture on this fat cap side. Doesn't have to be perfect, like I said. You just want to get the bulk of it off. And you'll see how the ones that I have in there, they've been in there, I believe I put them in the 9th or the 10th. They've been in there 3 weeks now. You'll see how they've progressed. I have 2 pork loins. I'm also going to go 45 days with, and I have a rib roast and a New York roast. I'm going to try that for the first time. Rib roast we know work. I'm trying some other less expensive cuts of meat to see if the dry aging makes a New York steak as good as a dry aged ribeye, then that'll significantly cut our costs. The problem is getting a full roast because you're going to have to shave that outer 1/8 to 1/4 inch. So let's go take a look. All right, before I walk it out here, let's take a look at the dry ager. We'll cover a couple things and I'll set a spot aside for it. So you can hear it running right now. So the way engineering wise, the basics of this is we have a temperature controller right here that is plugged into the house power. So the temperature controller has a heat plug, if you can see it here, and a cooling plug. And those of you who saw our making bacon video with Ron will recognize that temperature controller because it's the same. The temperature controller has a probe that I have hanging up here so that at the right temperatures either the heater or the cooler will turn on. And remember, I told you not to let it freeze. So as we're approaching winter, I had to put a little space heater in here, a little ceramic heater right here, so that if it does get below freezing overnight, that heater will turn on and it'll prevent this from freezing, but it'll still keep it at the dry aging temperature. So up here, I told you we had a New York going. It's desiccated really well, kind of scabbed over. It's kind of nasty to think about, but that's what it is. And the fat, you can almost chip it away. And you just heard the thing turn on because I had the door open. We also have the rib roast that I have, also well desiccated, and this is that fat cap that we're going to see. And then I have 2 pork tenderloins that are doing very well. I can feel them soft on the inside. So we plug the temperature controller into the house power, and then out of it we plug a heater, and we actually plug the refrigerator into the temperature controller within itself, so that as the temperature drops, this engages. Have your fridge turned all the way down, or whatever your highest setting is for keeping it cool when you do it this way. When I first did it, I had it set in the middle, and even though I had the temperature controller set to turn the fridge on at like 38 degrees, because I had it set on 5, it would actually creep up itself to 42 before it would turn on. So it took me a while to figure that out. Just have your fridge cranked all the way down to avoid that. And the fridge doesn't turn on until the temperature controller tells it to. This little thing here is the speed adjuster for one of our 2 circulation fans that we have. So we have one, we bolted it in top left, one on the bottom right. You want a good air circulation in your dry ager. So let's go grab that rib roast and we'll put it in there. A beautiful piece of meat here. We're gonna put her in over here. You don't want it touching any of the other meat, and like I said, we want to have our tag so that we can always read it. After about a week, you're going to want to come in and flip this thing over because it's going to stick a little bit to the grates. So that's the start of the dry aging process, and here in a couple of weeks we'll pull out, when Tim comes over again, we'll watch some football. Before we get too drunk, we'll pull the New York, the ribeye, and the 2 tenderloins out. We'll trim those up and we'll have a little taste test. We'll let you know how it works. And then maybe we'll do something with Tim's, but it really doesn't matter. You just want to see the start and the stop. So we'll put this video out there, and then we'll amend it a few weeks later, and we'll put out the finished product with the taste test.